Thanks very much, Nzinga, for that. Yes, well, of course, I'm joined in studio still by Dr. Dale McKinley and Khanyi Magubane. They're both independent political analysts. And, of course, we're just looking at some of the issues around the election. Dale, if I can call you that. Dale, your thoughts around coalitions. Obviously, that's going to be a very topical issue, particularly in the big metros, which are really important regions and account for a significant chunk of the votes. I think when you look at all the metropolitans, that number comes to 10.41 million in terms of the number of votes in terms of the registered voters out of the 26.2 million. And of course, we expect that the city of Johannesburg, Buffalo City and so on are going to have to forge coalitions. How difficult or easy is that going to be? And what ingredient is needed to ensure that we do have successful coalitions that work to serve the people rather than party political interests and people's egos?
Well, first of all, it's not going to be it's not an easy process. Coalitions are never an easy thing because what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring very different kinds of views, perspectives, policy positions and others into one room and come up with a compromise. But we have a history in South Africa of this. We must remind ourselves that, right from the beginning in 1994, there was a coalition of a different kind of sort that worked its way out. It could be criticized for a range of things, but I think the preconditions are quite clear. And it surprises me because here we are sitting and looking at the board and we're saying there's going to be a lot of coalitions. And yet the parties are taking these hardline positions about who, which is understandable, but they're going to have to get off the high horse and they're going to have to sit there and they're going to have to say, first of all, what kind of where are the areas that we can agree? Where are the areas that we disagree? And who's going to take care of which portfolios? How are we going to constitute the executive committee? Is it going to be a more collective? Will this be a coalition, in other words, of everyone, or is it going to be led by the largest party with the largest number of votes? Because that, the junior versus the senior partners, I think that's going to have to be addressed. And of course, the other thing is the agreements. If you notice, every single coalition in the last election, the public knew nothing about these agreements.
Yes.
If you look internationally at the experience, the agreements are made public. So everybody knows this is what the parties have agreed to, so they can be held accountable.
Correct.
If you're not going to make those agreements, if you're going to do them in secret, they're probably going to fall apart because things are not going to be, and then the public will have no means of holding those parties accountable. So those are some of the things that the parties are going to have to consider in order to have effective coalitions. And the last one is probably the most important one, which we mentioned, is political maturity. In other words, people are going to have to get down and say, we can't have a maximalist position, we can't have everything we want. We're going to have to compromise and, as we say, put the voters first. The parties have got to come second in coalitions, and I'm not sure we're quite there yet.
Can you, just touching on what Dale was saying about accountability, and people have talked about the lack of consequences when people do bad things, and so on. And we know that the municipalities, we've heard from the Auditor General about wasteful expenditure and irregular expenditure and so on, to the tune of billions that could have been used for the right purposes to serve communities and so on and so forth. That's a key ingredient that's missing in South African politics, accountability. It's only come every 5 years when a political party will say, oh, please give us your vote, and then you don't seem to have any choice as to how they conduct themselves thereafter. What do you think needs to happen going forward to change that so that, they're more accountable and the electorate has a bit more of a leg to stand on in making sure that things get done from one year to the next?
Okay, so there's two things here. Number one, when we talk about accountability, we must also talk about consistency in the way that programs are delivered, because what we have in South Africa is this break in continuity. As each leader comes in, he or she comes in with their own team and their own sets of programs that they want to deliver for the next 5 years. And what will usually happen is that when the next leader comes in, a new set of programs is now devised. So we are leaving programs that are not finished within the 5 years. Chances are they won't get done. So there is no handover. Nobody's passing on the baton to say this is how far we went in the past 5 years, and this is where you guys need to continue, irregardless of which political party it is, because we're talking about service delivery. People want water, lights, and electricity, irrespective of which political party is delivering those services. And what I would love to see as democracy matures, as we talk about the maturing of democracy, is that there needs to be a pull away from instituting new programs every time you come in. You know, let's hold off on saying this is what we're going to do. No, let's look at what's been done and how we can take it forward. Secondly, on issues of accountability, it starts within the political party itself. We know that the ANC has the ethics committee, and the ethics committee, for all intensive purposes, is to do things like, even though it's more regulating party, breaking party rules or whatever, not so much governmental rules, but we need to have such ethics committee in government structures that are active throughout the 5 years. We need to have those step-aside policies to say, if anybody in public service or in government is caught, you know, in a wrangle, you know, there's court cases, there's fraud, and all kinds of charge allegations, you need to step away from your position. And if you are found guilty, there has to be a consequence for that, by way of you losing your position. But when we see people who are said to be corrupt continuously getting appointed to new positions, being redeployed. Redeployment is another thing. You get moved from here, there's fires that happen, and then instead of you being moved aside, you get redeployed to the next one. There are no consequences.
There are rewards, actually.
You just get rewarded by being redeployed. So let's stop the thing of saying an ineffective minister in the cabinet. Instead of them being told to step aside, an effective minister comes in. They just get redeployed to the next department, and they continue to be as ineffective as they were in the last department because of a lack of accountability. So those structures need to be in place consistently. That watchdog, function needs to actually start to take more precedence. We don't have a strong enough watchdog. Even the Public Protector's Office is supposed to be a watchdog of sorts, but we know what's been happening in Busisiwe Mkhwebane's office. So I would say accountability equals greater watchdog function.
Yes. I think they're going to advise me to wrap up very shortly. But Dale, I wanted to ask you, is this a time for self-introspection for the big parties? Given that nationally it does look like most of them have actually lost ground, although the EFF may have done a bit better. No, the DA has done a bit better. But the ANC and the EFF nationally so far look like they haven't done so well. Do you think that there needs to be some self-introspection about how you deal with the electorate and how you go about delivering what the electorate expects and demands?
Absolutely, and there's no better confirmation of that than the fact that the vast majority of the eligible population decided not to vote. Let's not forget that is the majority. So what does that tell the political parties? It tells them that they're not delivering. They're not offering what most people want to offer. Where are most of those people to be found? Working class, poor communities, the most impoverished of those communities. We have structural problems in this country. The ANC in particular, as the governing party, but also the DA, have not paid attention to the needs of that, where the minorities are fairly doing quite well. The elites are doing quite well, generally speaking. It's the majority of people that are saying, we are falling through the cracks. And so in that context, yes, there's not only a need for self-inspection, there's a need for renewal. There's a need for serious renewal, not just of the parties themselves, but their policies, so they can speak to that electorate. If they don't speak to that electorate, the next time it's going to even be a smaller, and I think they're going to find themselves out in the cold.
Dale, on that note, thank you very much. We're going to move on now.